The execution clock reads 00:07:32 when the prison doors open for the condemned man's final request. He asked to see only one thing before death, his retired police K9 Rex. Guards expect a quiet goodbye. Instead, the moment Rex enters the room, he stops cold. His ears lock forward. Then he explodes, barking sharp and relentless, not at the inmate, but at the prison warden standing beside the execution supervisor. The room tightens instantly. Rex strains against his handler, whining, then lunges forward and plants his body between the man and the officials, blocking them. The handler stumbles. A guard reaches for his weapon. The inmate breaks down, crying, confused but suddenly hopeful. This dog once helped put him on death row. Now, with minutes left on the clock, Rex is behaving like he has identified a real threat, and the system is trying to move forward anyway. The waiting room outside the execution chamber smells like disinfectant and cold metal. The man sits with his hands cuffed in front of him, elbows on his knees, head lowered. His breathing is slow but uneven, like his body is trying to stay calm while his chest keeps tightening. Two guards stand behind him. Another stands by the door. No one speaks. When the door finally opens, the sound of nails clicking on tile cuts through the silence. Rex walks in beside a uniformed K9 handler. The dog is older now. Gray touches his muzzle, but his eyes are sharp, alert, working. The man looks up the second he hears the sound. His face breaks instantly. His lips tremble. His shoulders shake before any sound comes out. He presses his cuffed hands against his mouth, trying to hold himself together. Rex stops 3 steps inside the room. His ears go forward. His nose lifts, pulling in the air, once, twice. Then everything changes. Instead of walking calmly to the handler's command position, Rex pulls forward. The handler tightens the leash, surprised. Rex ignores it. His tail is stiff, not wagging. His body lowers slightly, weight forward, focused. The man whispers Rex's name under his breath, voice cracked and thin. Rex moves straight to him. The dog circles once, fast and tight, nose brushing the man's legs, his boots, his hands. Then Rex presses his head hard into the man's stomach. The man lets out a broken sound and bends forward as far as the cuffs allow, pressing his forehead against Rex's neck. Tears hit the dog's fur. Rex whines, low, urgent. The handler frowns. "That's not standard greeting behavior," he mutters to one of the guards. Then Rex freezes. His head snaps up. His eyes lock across the room. On the prison warden. A deep growl builds in Rex's chest. It is not loud, but it is serious, controlled. The kind of warning K9 units are trained to give when they identify a threat. The room stiffens. The warden shifts his stance. "Control your dog," he says, voice tight but trying to sound calm. The handler pulls the leash. "Rex, heel." Rex does not move. Instead, he steps sideways, placing his full body between the seated man and the group of officials. His shoulder presses against the inmate's knees like a barrier. The growl gets louder. One detective takes a slow step back. The other reaches for his radio but doesn't speak yet. The guards behind the man adjust their grip on their weapons. The man starts crying openly now. Not quiet tears, full, shaking sobs, because this is wrong. This is impossible. This dog helped arrest him. This dog testified through alerts and behavior that helped put him here. And now Rex is protecting him. "Please," the man chokes. "He's trying to tell you something." "Quiet," one guard snaps. The execution supervisor checks his watch, then looks at the warden. Silent question. The warden's jaw tightens. "Remove the animal if it's compromised." The handler steps forward again, pulling harder. "Rex, down." Rex suddenly barks. Sharp, explosive, echoing off the concrete walls. Several guards flinch. Rex lunges one step forward, not toward the inmate. Toward the warden. The leash goes tight. The handler braces, boots sliding half an inch on the polished floor. Whoa, Rex, stand down. Rex keeps barking. His eyes never leave the warden. Saliva flicks from his mouth with each bark. His front paws dig into the tile like he's trying to launch again. The room shifts from tense to dangerous in seconds. One guard fully raises his weapon. The man sees it. His breathing turns into panicked gasps. Don't hurt him, please don't hurt him. The handler struggles, voice strained. He's not losing control. This is target-focused behavior. That sentence lands heavy. Target focus. Everyone looks at the warden again. The execution supervisor raises a hand. Stop the clock, now. A red light above the hallway door flickers from steady to blinking. Execution timeline paused. But Rex is still growling. Still planted between the man and the officials. And then Rex slowly lowers his head and shows his teeth. Not wild. Not panicked. Deliberate. PR. Professional. Like he has identified a real threat. The warden takes one step backward. And Rex instantly barks again, louder this time. The second bark echoes down the hallway outside the waiting room. Footsteps rush closer. More guards. More radios crackling. The pressure in the room feels like it is pushing down on everyone's chest. The handler plants his feet wider, using both hands on the leash now. Rex is pulling forward with steady, controlled force. Not wild, not confused, focused. Rex, the handler says again, lower this time, firmer. Stand down. For half a second, Rex's ear twitches back toward the handler's voice. Then his eyes lock back on the warden. The growl returns, deeper now, warning level. The inmate's breathing is loud and shaky behind him. The man presses one cuffed hand into Rex's side like he is holding onto the only stable thing left in the room. His face is wet, red. His body is shaking so hard the metal chair squeaks under him. Please, he says again, voice breaking. He never does this for no reason. The execution supervisor steps closer to the warden, speaking low but urgent. Sir, we need to clear the room or restrain the animal. We can't proceed like this. The warden stares at Rex. His face looks controlled, but sweat has started to form at his temple. He wipes it away quickly like he hopes no one noticed. This is a delay tactic, the warden says. Remove the dog, resume protocol. But his voice is tighter now. One of the detectives shifts his weight. His eyes move from Rex to the warden, then back to Rex. The dog's posture is not random aggression. The detective has seen K9 alerts before. Drug finds, hidden suspects, weapon searches. This looks closer to suspect identification behavior. Sir, the detective says carefully, maybe we should document this. The warden's head snaps toward him. Document what? A retired dog losing discipline. Before the detective can answer, Rex suddenly stops barking. The silence hits like a slap. Rex lowers his head slightly. His nose flares. He takes one slow step forward, leash stretched tight. His eyes never blink. The handler feels it. That shift K9 handlers are trained to notice. The moment a dog moves from warning to confirmation. Oh no, the handler whispers under his breath. Rex lets out one sharp, controlled bark. Then he sits, still blocking the inmate with his body, still staring directly at the warden. Indication. The same trained, final signal Rex used when he found hidden suspects during operations. The detective inhales sharply. That's an indication, Sid. The room goes completely still. The execution supervisor slowly lowers the clipboard in his hand. The inmate stares at Rex like he is seeing a ghost and a miracle at the same time. Hope crashes into him so fast it almost looks like pain. His chest heaves. His lips shake. The warden laughs once, short, forced. You're all letting a dog run this room. but he doesn't step forward anymore. Another guard rushes in from the hallway. "Sir, internal security is asking why the execution clock stopped." No one answers right away, because now everyone is staring at the same thing. A retired police K9, sitting in perfect trained posture, guarding a man scheduled to die in minutes, and identifying the highest authority figure in the room as a threat. The execution supervisor finally speaks, voice tight. No one moves the inmate. No one removes the dog. The warden turns slowly toward him. "That is not your call." The supervisor swallows. His hands are shaking slightly. "Right now, sir, it is." The blinking red light above the hallway door keeps flashing. Time is stopped, but tension is building faster than the clock ever could. The training field smelled like wet grass and rubber mats. Morning fog still clung low to the ground. The man jogged across the field, Rex running tight at his left leg, perfectly in step. Every few seconds the man glanced down, not because he didn't trust Rex, but because seeing him there made something in his chest feel steady. "Search," the man said, pointing toward a row of stacked barrels. Rex shot forward instantly. Fast, controlled, nose low, tail straight, working. 3 other officers stood near the patrol cars, watching. One of them shook his head, impressed. "That dog moves like he's reading your mind." The man allowed a small smile but didn't look away from Rex. He just listens. Rex reached the barrels, slowed. Nose working harder now, he circled once, twice. Then he sat, still locked in place. The training supervisor checked the barrel. Inside, taped under the rim, was a training pistol. "Clean indication," the supervisor said. "Again." The man nodded, pride mixed with calm confidence in his chest, because Rex didn't guess. Rex didn't panic. Rex worked. That was why the department trusted them. Later, back at the K9 unit building, Rex walked loose beside him without command. When the man stopped to sign paperwork, Rex leaned Lytle. Why against his leg, not needy, just present. "You spoil that dog," another handler joked, walking past with a younger shepherd. "He earns it," the man said simply. Inside the locker room, the man sat on the bench, unlacing his boots. Rex lay at his feet, head resting on one paw, eyes still watching the room. Even relaxed, he monitored movement. Doors opening, voices, footsteps. Working brain never fully off. The man reached down and scratched behind Rex's ear. Rex's tail thumped once against the floor. Simple trust, routine. That night at home, Rex followed him through the small house, nails clicking softly on hardwood. The man dropped his keys in a bowl. Rex immediately moved to the front window, scanning the street out of habit. "Clear," the man said softly, half joking. Rex looked back at him anyway, like he understood tone if not words. Later, the man sat on the edge of his bed, staring at divorce papers spread across the blanket. His jaw was tight, his eyes red but dry. He hadn't cried, not yet. Rex jumped onto the bed beside him, something he normally never did without permission. The man looked at him, surprised. Rex pressed his body against his side, warm, solid, breathing slow and steady. The man's shoulders dropped. Some of the tightness left his chest. He rested one hand on Rex's back and just sat there. Not alone. Weeks later, during a night patrol operation, that trust saved his life. They were clearing a construction site after an alarm trigger. Flashlights cut through half-built walls and hanging wires. The air smelled like dust and oil. Rex suddenly stiffened. The leash went tight. "Easy," the man whispered, scanning ahead. Rex gave a low warning growl, focused toward a dark doorway. The man raised his radio. Possible movement, northeast corner. Before backup could answer, a man burst from the doorway with a knife. Rex launched instantly. No hesitation. He hit the attacker mid-torso, knocking him flat. The knife skidded across concrete. The man rushed forward, securing the suspect, heart hammering so hard he could hear it in his ears. Afterward, sitting on the curb while paramedics checked the suspect, the man rested his forehead briefly against Rex's head. "Good boy," he whispered, voice thick with adrenaline and relief. From that night on, the unit stopped seeing them as handler and dog. They saw them as one working system. Months later, during a department open house, kids lined up to pet Rex. The man stood nearby, relaxed, proud, answering questions. Rex stayed calm, gentle, patient. Until one moment. A visiting administrative officer walked into the K-9 area. Rex's ears went forward. His body stiffened slightly. Not aggressive, just alert. The man noticed. His hand rested automatically on Rex's collar, grounding him, reassuring him. The officer kept walking. Rex's eyes followed him the entire time. The man frowned slightly, because Rex almost never watched people like that without reason. And for the first time, a small, uncomfortable question formed in the back of his mind. The open house noise returned around them, kids laughing, officers talking, radios buzzing, but the man barely heard any of it. His focus stayed on Rex. The administrative officer walked past the K-9 kennels toward the main hallway. Rex's head tracked him the entire way, not barking, not growling, just locked in. "Easy," the man whispered, fingers pressing lightly into Rex's collar. Rex blinked once, but his body stayed tense. Another handler stepped closer, following the man's gaze. "Something off." "Maybe," the man said quietly, "or maybe I'm overthinking." But he was. Because Rex had worked hundreds of public events. Rex knew how to filter noise, movement, strangers. He only locked onto people when training told him something mattered. The administrative officer disappeared down the hallway. Rex finally looked back at the man. The tension left his shoulders slowly, like he was letting go of a decision. The man exhaled without realizing he'd been holding his breath. Later that evening, back in the patrol unit garage, the man brushed Rex down after shift. Slow strokes, routine, grounding. "You good today?" he asked quietly. Rex leaned slightly into the brush. "Normal again." But the man's brain kept replaying that moment. The stillness, the focus, the way Rex watched that officer walk away. 2 weeks later, the bond between them was tested harder than ever. The call came just after midnight. Possible armed suspects moving through an abandoned warehouse district. Multiple units responding. Inside the patrol SUV, blue lights flashed across Rex's fur. The dog sat upright in the back compartment, already in work mode. Mouth closed, ears forward, eyes sharp. The man felt that familiar shift inside himself too. Personal life off, work brain on. "Dispatch K-9 en route," he said into the radio. When they arrived, officers were already setting a perimeter. The warehouse stood dark except for one broken security light, flickering near a loading bay. The air smelled like oil, rust, and stale water. "Team 2 clears west side," a lieutenant ordered. "K-9 takes interior with Alpha unit." The man clipped Rex into working lead. "Search building," he commanded quietly. Rex moved forward instantly, nose low, body smooth and controlled. Boots echoed behind him as the man followed, weapon ready but angled low. Inside, the warehouse felt huge and hollow. Every step bounced sound off metal walls. Somewhere water dripped steadily. Rex slowed near a stack of wooden pallets. His nose moved faster. Then he shifted direction suddenly, toward a side corridor leading deeper inside. The man keyed his radio. "K-9 picking up something, moving east interior." "Copy," dispatch answered. Rex's pace increased, not frantic, purposeful. Then he gave a short, sharp alert bark. "Contact alert." The man's pulse spiked. He raised his weapon slightly. Police K9, show yourself. No answer. Rex pulled harder now, dragging him 2 steps forward before the man regained balance. They turned a corner into a darker loading area. The man's flashlight beam cut across metal shelving, old crates, a closed security office door. Rex stopped, his entire body locked. The same posture, the same deep chest growl starting low. The man's stomach dropped slightly, because he trusted this signal more than his own eyes. Something's here, he whispered into the radio. Then, a loud metallic crash echoed from somewhere deeper, inside the warehouse. Gunfire exploded. Shouts filled the radio, and Rex surged forward toward the security office door, just as chaos swallowed the building. Gunfire ripped through the warehouse like metal tearing apart. The man dropped behind a stack of crates, dragging Rex with him as bullets cracked into steel shelving nearby. Dust and splinters filled the air. The radio screamed with overlapping voices. Officer down. Shots fired east side. Need backup inside. Rex barked once, sharp and urgent, trying to pull forward again toward the security office door. His nails scraped against the concrete as he dug in, muscles tight, desperate to move. Hold, the man ordered, grabbing Rex's harness with both hands. His heart slammed against his ribs. Training fought against instinct, because Rex only pulled like this when he had a locked target. Another gunshot echoed, closer this time. Then silence. Not quiet. The heavy, wrong kind of silence after violence. The man keyed his radio. Alpha K9 inside East Loading Zone. Status check. Static. Then someone yelled, voice breaking, "Officer hit, officer hit." The man's stomach dropped hard. His mouth went dry. Location, he demanded. Near loading docks, East Interior. The voice cut into static again. That was close, too close. Rex was whining now, low and frantic, pulling again toward the security office. The man hesitated 1 second, just one, then made a decision. Move, he whispered. They ran. Boots pounded against concrete. The flashlight beam bounced wildly across walls and crates. Rex pulled slightly ahead, nose working fast, tracking scent and sound. They rounded the corner into the loading zone. And stopped. An officer lay on his back near the dock ramp. Blood spread dark across his vest and shirt. Another officer knelt beside him, hands pressed hard against the wound. Help me hold pressure, the kneeling officer shouted. The man rushed forward, dropping beside them, pressing both hands over the wound. Warm blood soaked into his gloves instantly. Stay with me, he said to the fallen officer, voice tight and urgent. Behind him, Rex barked, not at the injured officer. Not at the kneeling officer. Past them. Toward the security office hallway again. The man turned slightly. Clear that corridor, he shouted to another team rushing in. 2 officers ran past, weapons raised. Seconds later. Clear, one shouted from down the hall. No one here. The words hit wrong. Rex barked again, harder, frustrated. The man's chest tightened. Rex did not false alert, not here, not during active threat. Paramedics rushed in. Hands replaced his on the wound. Someone pulled him back gently. You're good, we got him, a medic said. The man stumbled backward 2 steps, chest heaving. His hands shook as adrenaline dumped through his body. Rex immediately pressed into his leg, grounding him. Then Rex turned again. Toward the security office door. The man followed his gaze. The door was closed, metal, no window. One of the clearing officers stepped out from that hallway. Nothing inside, empty office. The man walked closer anyway, Rex pulling slightly ahead. Did you check corners? He asked, voice tight. Yeah, quick sweep, clear. Rex reached the door and sat. Indication. Slow, exact, certain. The man's pulse hammered in his ears. Check again, he said, louder this time. The officer sighed but turned back, opening the door. Inside, desk, broken chair, filing cabinet, dust, old monitors. Clear, the officer rep. Edith louder, almost annoyed now. Rex stood, whining sharply, trying to push past him into the room. The man stepped inside with him. The air smelled stale, dead, old electronics and dust. Rex circled once, nose working fast along the wall near the filing cabinet. Then, he pawed at the floor. Hard. The man dropped to one knee, shining his light down. Concrete. Cracked slightly along a square seam line. His breath caught. Behind him, more officers flooded the warehouse. Radios screamed updates. Someone shouted that the injured officer was critical. The man pressed his palm against the concrete seam. Cold. Solid. But Rex kept pawing, growling. Like something was right under them. Or had been. And for the first time, a cold, crawling feeling moved up the man's spine. Because if Rex was right, then someone had been hiding here during the shooting. The man ran his hand slowly across the cracked seam in the concrete. Dust collected in the shallow groove. It looked old, like no one had touched it in years. But Rex kept pawing at the exact same spot, claws scraping, breathing fast, low growl vibrating through his chest. Back up, the man said quietly to the officer in the doorway. The officer frowned. It's just floor. Back up, the man repeated, sharper this time. The officer stepped out of the room, raising his radio but not speaking yet. The man leaned closer, pressing his ear near the concrete for 1 second. Nothing. No sound. But Rex pushed his nose to the seam and inhaled hard, then let out a short, frustrated bark. Scent. Old but real. The man stood and keyed his radio. Possible hidden compartment in security office floor. Need maintenance tools or breach kit. Static. Then negative. Priority is officer rescue and suspect sweep. The man's jaw tightened. Rex is giving full indication. Copy, dispatch said flatly. Continue primary mission. Primary mission. Find shooter. But Rex was already telling him something important. The man stepped back into the hallway. Chaos still filled the warehouse. Officers moving. Paramedics rushing out with the wounded officer on a stretcher. Blood drops marked the path. A lieutenant approached fast. Status. Rex indicates someone was in that office, the man said. Maybe hiding during shooting. The lieutenant shook his head. Clearing teams found nothing. He's not guessing, the man said, voice tight. You know that. The lieutenant hesitated, just for a second. Then he sighed. Log it, we'll check later. Later. The word landed heavy. Because later meant lost time. Lost scent. Lost evidence. Behind them, detectives were already stringing tape across parts of the warehouse. Crime scene mode beginning. Rex whined softly, pacing once, then sitting again facing the office. Waiting. Still working. The man crouched beside him, gripping his harness lightly. I know, he whispered. Hours later, after the building was cleared and the wounded officer was rushed to surgery, investigators began documenting the scene. The man stood near the loading dock giving his statement. His clothes still smelled like gunpowder and blood. Rex lay at his feet but stayed alert, eyes tracking every movement. A detective approached holding a tablet. Walk me through your movement again. The man did, step by step, honest, exact. When he reached the security office part, the detective nodded but didn't type much. We'll review camera feeds, the detective said. There's a camera in that hallway, the man said quickly, pointed toward the office door. The detective nodded, already flagged. Hope flickered slightly in the man's chest. If the camera worked, it could confirm if someone entered or left that office. Across the warehouse, another group of investigators quietly bagged shell casings, photographed blood spatter, marked bullet strikes. Rex suddenly stood. Stiff. The man turned instantly. What? Rex stared across the warehouse, toward a group of senior officials who had just arrived to observe the scene. Among them, the same administrative officer from the open house weeks earlier. Rex's ears went forward. His body locked. Low growls started again. The man's pulse spiked. Easy, he whispered, gripping the harness. The officer spoke quietly with detectives, gesturing toward the security hallway, like he was asking specific questions. Rex took one step forward, then sat. Not full indication posture, but close. Watching. Tracking. Remembering. The man's stomach twisted, because Rex was linking something. The warehouse. The office. That officer. And the night was not even close to being over. Across the building, someone shouted that the wounded officer had just flatlined on the way to the hospital. The entire warehouse seemed to go silent again. And the man felt, deep in his gut, that this night had just changed his life forever. The courtroom air felt heavy and stale, like no one had opened a window in years. The man sat at the defense table in a stiff orange jail uniform, wrists C. Haned together in front of him. His shoulders were tight. His jaw ached from clenching it for hours. Across the room, Rex sat beside a K-9 unit officer assigned to court security. Not his handler anymore, not his partner, just a security dog now. Rex's ears were forward. His eyes moved slowly across the room, tracking faces, movement, tone. The man tried not to look at him too long, because it hurt too much. The prosecutor stood near a projector screen showing still images from the warehouse surveillance timeline. Grainy black and white hallway shots, time stamps blinking in the corner. Camera coverage confirms the defendant was within range of the shooting location, the prosecutor said, voice steady and confident. The man's chest felt tight because it was true, he had been close. But not alone. His lawyer leaned toward him. Stay calm, let me handle this. The man nodded slightly, but his knee bounced under the table, uncontrolled, anxiety leaking through muscle. On the screen, the hallway camera angle showed the corridor leading toward the security office. Timestamp 00:14:22. Empty hallway. Timestamp 00:15:03. Still empty. Timestamp 00:16:11. The man and Rex running past frame toward the loading zone. The prosecutor turned to the jury. No one else is seen entering or exiting the security office area during the critical window. The words felt like a physical blow. The man's throat tightened because he knew what Rex had done, what Rex had signaled. Across the courtroom, Rex shifted. Subtle, but noticeable to anyone trained to read K-9 posture. His head tilted slightly. His nose lifted once, like he was smelling something that wasn't there. The K-9 officer holding his leash frowned slightly but didn't move. The defense attorney stood. Your Honor, we would like to introduce K-9 alert behavior logs from the night of the incident. The prosecutor sighed, clearly annoyed. The dog cleared multiple zones that night. Selective interpretation is misleading. The judge nodded toward the defense. Proceed briefly. The defense lawyer held up a printed report. At approximately 00:15, the K-9 gave a focused alert at the security office floor location. That alert was documented by body cam audio and 2 officer statements. The prosecutor stepped forward immediately, and the area was cleared. No suspect found, no weapon found, no entry point found. The defense lawyer didn't sit, because no one broke open the floor seam despite the K9's repeated indication. Murmurs moved through the courtroom. The man felt his pulse in his throat now, because this was the first time anyone was saying it out loud in front of the jury. The prosecutor clicked to the next slide. Maintenance report. The defense lawyer frowned. What is that? Facility inspection log, the prosecutor said. Security office concrete foundation inspected 2 weeks prior to the incident. No structural modifications. No access compartments. The man's stomach dropped, because that sounded final. Permanent. Across the room, Rex suddenly let out a low whine. Not loud, but sharp enough that several jurors looked over. The K9 officer tightened the leash slightly. Easy, he whispered. Rex stood slowly, eyes locked toward the back row of the courtroom. The man followed his gaze. 3 men in plain suits sat near the rear wall. One of them shifted uncomfortably under Rex's stare. The judge looked annoyed. Control the animal. The K9 officer nodded, guiding Rex back into a sit. But Rex didn't relax. His eyes stayed fixed on the same section of the room. The defense lawyer kept talking, arguing timeline inconsistencies, but the man barely heard him, because a memory flashed hard and fast. Rex staring at the administrative officer in the warehouse. Rex staring at the same direction now. The prosecutor turned back toward the jury. There is no physical evidence of another shooter, no DNA, no second weapon, no forced entry, only speculation. The word speculation hung in the air like a sentence. The man's chest felt hollow, because juries believed physical evidence, not instincts, not dogs. The judge called for a short recess. As officers began moving people out, Rex twisted slightly, trying to keep that back row section in view. One of the suited men stood quickly and exited through a side door. Rex gave one sharp bark. Heads turned. The man's heart slammed once hard, because Rex had just done something he almost never did in controlled environments. Alerted in court. And no one except him seemed to understand how serious that was. The courtroom doors closed behind the jury as the recess officially began. Conversations started low and tense across the room. Papers shuffled, chairs scraped, but the man barely heard any of it. His focus stayed locked on Rex. The K9 officer tried guiding Rex toward the hallway exit, but Rex resisted slightly, not aggressive, not disobedient, just planted, watching the same side door where the suited man had exited. Come on, the officer said quietly, giving a firm leash signal. Rex moved but slowly, reluctantly. The man leaned toward his lawyer. Did you see that? The lawyer followed his gaze. The bark. He doesn't bark in controlled rooms, not unless, he stopped himself, swallowing hard, not unless he's identifying someone. The lawyer's expression tightened slightly, not disbelief, but caution. We can't build a defense on dog behavior alone. The man nodded, but his chest felt tight again, because he knew that was true, and it still felt wrong. Across the room, the prosecutor spoke quietly with 2 detectives. One of them glanced once toward Rex, then looked away fast. That small moment didn't escape the man. The bailiff approached the defense table. You'll have 10 minutes before jury returns. The man nodded slowly. Then, before he could second-guess himself, he stood. Chains rattled softly. Bathroom, he said. 2 deputies escorted him into the hallway. Rex and the K9 officer were already there, standing near the far wall. The second Rex saw him, his tail moved once. Low, controlled, but real. The man's throat tightened. The deputies stopped him a few feet away, while the K9 officer adjusted his grip on the leash. Rex stepped closer, nose lifting toward the man's chest, then toward his hands, then back toward his face. Routine recognition check. Then Rex turned suddenly, toward the courthouse exit corridor. Body stiff. Low growl starting again. The K-9 officer frowned. That's twice today. One of the deputies shifted nervously, dog picking up something. Maybe, the officer said, but his tone said he wasn't sure he believed his own answer. Down the hallway through the glass doors, the suited man from the back row was visible outside on the courthouse steps, talking on a phone, pacing fast. Rex took one step forward, then sat. Not full indication posture, but close enough that the K-9 officer went very still. Okay, that's weird, the officer muttered. The man felt adrenaline start rising in his bloodstream. That's not random, he said quietly. The deputy closest to him exhaled slowly. You need to focus on your case. But the deputy's eyes stayed on Rex. Outside, the suited man finished his call and turned slightly. For half a second, his eyes met Rex's through the glass. Then he looked away immediately. Too fast. Too sharp. Rex gave a soft but clear warning bark. The courthouse hallway went silent. The K-9 officer pulled the leash shorter. All right, that's enough. But Rex didn't relax. He tracked the man outside until he disappeared down the sidewalk. The inmate's chest felt tight. Not panic, something sharper, something colder. Because this wasn't the first time. Warehouse. Open house. Now court. Same type of reaction. The deputies finally turned him toward the restroom corridor. As they walked, the man's brain replayed the prosecutor's words. No physical evidence. No second suspect. Just speculation. But Rex didn't speculate. Rex detected. Rex identified. And Rex was trying, over and over, to point at something the system refused to see. Back inside the courtroom minutes later, everyone returned to position. The jury filed back in. The judge called the session to order. The prosecutor resumed like nothing had happened. Slides, timelines, clean narrative. System moving forward. The man sat down slowly, chains settling against the table. Across the room, Rex lay beside the K-9 officer again. But he didn't rest his head. He stayed upright. Watching. Working. And for the first time since the trial began, the man felt something small and dangerous rise inside his chest. Not hope. Not yet. But doubt. Because if Rex was right, then someone in this case was still walking free. The holding corridor outside the execution chamber buzzed with low, urgent movement. Radios crackled. Boots moved fast across tile. The red execution delay lights still blinked down the hallway, painting everything in pulses of warning color. Inside the temporary holding room, the man sat on a narrow bench, wrists cuffed, ankles chained. His chest still felt tight from the emotional crash of seeing Rex again, but now something else sat under it. Tension. Waiting. Outside the small, reinforced window, two guards whispered to each other, glancing down the hall every few seconds. Then footsteps approached, fast, determined. A young officer appeared at the window, talking quietly into a phone. His uniform looked slightly out of place here. Prison staff wore darker, heavier gear. He looked like city police. The man didn't recognize him. But Rex did. Down the hallway, just out of sight, Rex barked once. Sharp. Focused. The young officer stopped mid-sentence on the phone. His head turned toward the sound instantly. Yeah, hold on, he said quietly into the phone. He walked closer down the hall, out of the man's sight line. Seconds later, the K-9 handler rounded the corner holding Rex's leash tight. Rex's body was rigid, alert, eyes locked forward. Locked on the young officer. Not aggressive, but intense. The handler slowed, "You know this officer?" he asked the young man. The young officer shook his head slowly. "No, but I've seen K9 focus like that before." Rex let out a low, vibrating growl, not loud enough to alarm the guards, but enough that both men felt it through the leash tension. The young officer crouched slightly, not reaching toward Rex, just lowering himself to eye level. "Easy, partner," he said quietly. Rex sniffed the air, then stepped closer. Then stopped. Then looked past the young officer. Further down the hallway. Toward the main administrative wing. The young officer stood slowly. His expression had changed, less curious, more alert. "Who's on admin rotation tonight?" he asked one of the guards. The guard shrugged. "Warden, 2 investigators, same as earlier." The young officer nodded once, like he had expected that answer. Inside the holding room, the man leaned forward, straining to hear anything through the thick door. Because he recognized that tone. That was the tone officers used when something stopped feeling routine. Down the hall, Rex suddenly pulled left, toward a side corridor. The handler braced, Rex heel. Rex didn't bark. Didn't growl. Just stared down that corridor like he was tracking a memory. The young officer followed his gaze. "What's down there?" "Evidence transfer offices," the guard said. "Old case archives, too." The young officer's jaw tightened slightly. "From how far back?" he asked. The guard shrugged again. "Decades." Rex whined once. Then sat. Not full suspect indication, but investigative focus. The handler looked at the young officer. "He's not acting unstable. He's tracking associations." The young officer nodded slowly. "Yeah, I see that." He pulled out his phone again, stepping away slightly. "Yeah," he whispered. "Cross-check something for me. Warehouse case. Year." His voice faded as he walked further down the hall. Inside the holding room, the man's heart pounded faster. Because something was happening. Something bigger than a delay. Minutes later, the young officer came back, faster this time. Face pale. Eyes sharp. He stopped in front of the handler. That warehouse case, who supervised evidence storage after intake. The handler frowned. "That would have been central admin. Why?" The young officer swallowed once. "Because the current warden was assigned to evidence logistics oversight that month." The air in the hallway seemed to freeze. Rex stood. Low growl returning. The handler stared at the young officer. "You sure?" "I just pulled personnel transfers," the officer said. "Temporary assignment, same week as the raid." Inside the holding room, the man closed his eyes for 1 second. Because pieces were starting to move. Outside, the guard shifted uncomfortably. "That doesn't mean anything." But his voice sounded weaker than before. Down the hallway, heavy footsteps approached. "Command staff." "Authority." The young officer straightened, sliding his phone into his pocket. Rex moved instantly, stepping in front of the holding room door. Blocking it. Like he was guarding the man inside. And at that exact moment, the warden turned the corner into the hallway. The hallway went still the moment the warden appeared. 2 senior investigators walked beside him, their expressions tight and unreadable. The warden's eyes scanned the corridor once, fast, controlled, until they landed on Rex. Rex's growl deepened instantly. Not loud, but heavy, certain, like a warning pushed through clenched teeth. The handler tightened the leash, bracing his stance. "Easy, Rex." But Rex stepped forward anyway, placing himself fully between the holding room door and the approaching group. Blocking access. Protecting. Inside the holding room, the man's pulse slammed so hard he could hear it in his ears. He stood slowly, chains dragging across the floor, moving closer to the reinforced window. Because he needed to see this. The young officer stepped slightly to the side, positioning himself where he could see both Rex and the warden clearly. The warden stopped about 8 feet away. "That dog needs to be removed from this corridor," he said, voice calm but edged with command. The handler didn't move yet. "Sir, he's not acting unstable, he's—" "I didn't ask for a behavioral analysis," the warden cut in. Rex barked once. Sharp, explosive, echoing off concrete walls. One of the investigators flinched. The warden's jaw tightened. "Control your dog." But he still didn't step closer. The young officer noticed that. Not fear exactly, but hesitation. Rex's nose lifted, pulling in scent. His eyes never left the warden's face, chest, hands, cataloging everything like a trained search pattern. Then Rex shifted his stance slightly and sat. Perfect posture. Direct line facing the warden. Indication. The handler went very still. His voice dropped. "That's not random behavior." One of the investigators scoffed. "It's a retired K-9. Reacting to stress." But the young officer spoke quietly, or recognition. The word hung there. Heavy. Dangerous. The warden's eyes snapped toward him. "Officer, you are out of your lane." The young officer swallowed but didn't look away. "Sir, with respect, I pulled personnel records. You were on temporary evidence oversight the week of the warehouse incident." Silence crushed the hallway. The investigator beside the warden shifted his stance. "That was administrative rotation. That's not." Rex barked again. Louder. Then leaned forward slightly, teeth visible, not snapping, not wild, controlled threat display. The handler dug his boots into the floor, gripping the leash hard. "Sir, he's identifying you as a subject of interest." The warden laughed once, short, forced. "You are letting an animal dictate procedure." But sweat had formed along his hairline again. Inside the holding room, the man pressed his forehead lightly against the glass. His chest shook, not from panic. From something sharper. Hope trying to exist, and fear trying to crush it at the same time. Down the hall, another supervisor approached quickly. "Execution team needs confirmation. Clock can't stay paused much longer." The warden exhaled slowly, regaining control, rebuilding authority. "Resume timeline," he said flatly. "Remove the dog, return the inmate to protocol." The young officer stepped forward half a step. "Sir, if there's even a small chance evidence chain was compromised." "That is enough," the warden snapped. 2 additional guards stepped closer to the holding room door. Rex immediately stood, moving tighter against it, growl vibrating deep through his chest. The handler spoke quietly, almost to himself. "He's in full protective mode now." Inside, the man closed his eyes for 1 second. Because time was moving again. Because authority was pushing back. Because truth was still trying to surface, but the system was stronger. The red hallway light flickered once, then shifted back to steady. Execution timeline restarting. Rex barked again, louder than before, as the guards reached for the door handle. And for the first time, the young officer pulled his radio up and said one sentence, voice tight but clear. "I need internal affairs and execution block, now." The execution hallway felt tighter now, like the walls themselves were closing in. The steady red light glowed above the chamber doors, no longer blinking. Time was moving again. Boots moved with purpose, no hesitation, no discussion. 2 guards unlocked the holding room door. Inside, the man stood slowly as they entered. His chains rattled softly. His chest rose and fell too fast, like his body was trying to outrun what was coming. "Time to move," one guard said, voice flat and procedural. The man nodded once, because fighting physically would change nothing. But his eyes flicked past them. To Rex, standing rigid in the hallway. watching. The second the man stepped into the corridor, Rex moved instantly, pressing against his leg, positioning himself between the man and the guards. Low growl vibrating through his chest. The handler tightened the leash. Rex heel. Rex shifted, but only enough to stay touching the man's leg. Protective contact. The young officer stood near the wall, radio still in his hand, eyes moving between the warden, the guards, and Rex. Waiting. Listening. The warden stood 10 feet away, arms folded, face calm again, composed, in control. Proceed, he said quietly. The execution team began walking the man toward the chamber doors. Rex walked with them, muscles tight, ears forward, nose working constantly like he was trying to lock onto something that was slipping away. Halfway down the corridor, Rex suddenly jerked left hard. The handler stumbled one step, barely keeping balance. What the Rex? Rex planted his paws, pulling toward the evidence corridor again, whining now, urgent, desperate. The man twisted slightly, looking back. Because he knew that sound. That was Rex telling him something was wrong. Keep moving, a guard ordered, gripping his arm tighter. The young officer stepped forward. Sir, if the dog is still associating the evidence corridor. The warden didn't even look at him. Remove the dog from the execution wing. 2 additional guards moved toward the handler. The handler's jaw tightened. He's still working, sir. He is interfering, the warden replied coldly. Rex barked. Loud. Explosive. The sound echoed off every surface. The man flinched hard. Because that bark wasn't warning. It was protest. The handler dropped his voice. Rex, easy, easy. Rex kept staring toward the evidence corridor. Then he did something rare. He tried to break leash position. Not wild, not panicked. Intentional forward surge. The handler had to wrap the leash once around his wrist to hold him. Sir, the handler said, breathing heavier now. He is not losing control. He is tracking something specific. The warden's eyes hardened. Remove the dog. The 2 guards reached for the leash line. Rex's growl turned deep, warning not toward the guards. Toward the direction of the evidence wing. The young officer spoke again, louder now. Internal affairs is en route. We should hold execution until. Officer, the warden said slowly, turning to face him fully now, you are interfering with a lawful sentence. The young officer swallowed but didn't step back. If evidence handling was compromised. The warden stepped closer to him. You are speculating based on an animal. The hallway air felt electric now. The execution chamber doors were only 20 feet away. The man's breathing was coming in short bursts. His legs felt heavier with each step. Because hope had started. And now it was being crushed in real time. Behind him, Rex let out a high, sharp whine, almost like pain. The man twisted his head back again. Rex. The handler braced harder. He's trying to anchor to you, he said quietly. Ahead, the chamber doors opened. Cold air rolled out. The execution technician stood inside, waiting. The man's chest felt hollow. Behind him, Rex barked again, louder than any bark yet. And this time, every single person in the hallway froze. The bark echoed through the execution wing like an alarm. Not panic. Not random noise. Command-level urgency. Every officer in the hallway paused instinctively. Years of training wired them to react when a working K9 signaled like that. Even here. Even now. Rex lunged forward again, muscles locked, pulling so hard the handler staggered half a step. The leash stretched tight as steel cable. Rex, hold, the handler shouted, voice cracking under strain. But Rex wasn't looking at the man anymore. He was looking past him. Past the execution chamber doors. toward the side security hallway that connected to the evidence transfer route. The young officer saw it instantly. "He's still tracking the same direction," he said, breath quick but controlled. The warden exhaled sharply. "Enough." He turned to the execution technician. "Proceed." The technician hesitated just a second, then nodded slowly. Inside the chamber, machines hummed quietly, sterile, cold, waiting. The guards started guiding the man forward again. The man's knees felt weak. His chest hurt like something heavy was sitting on it, but he forced his feet to move, because there was no choice left in his body. Behind him, Rex made a sound no one in that hallway had ever heard before. Not a bark. Not a growl. A deep, desperate howl. It cut through the hallway like grief and warning mixed together. The handler's eyes widened. I have never heard him do that. The young officer stepped forward. "Sir, this is not normal working behavior. This is escalation." The warden turned sharply. "This is emotional projection. Resume protocol." But his voice was thinner now. Rex dropped low suddenly, nose pressed hard to the floor tiles, sniffing fast, following a line invisible to everyone else. Then he surged forward 3 steps, dragging the handler with him toward the side security door. The handler slammed into the wall trying to stop him. "Rex, stand down." Rex barked again, rapid this time, urgent, directional. The young officer moved closer to the side hallway door. "What's through here?" "Secondary transport access," one guard said. "Used for evidence movement and restricted staff transit." The young officer grabbed the handle and pulled. "Locked." Rex barked directly at the door now, pawing once, hard. Indication behavior again. The handler stared. "He thinks something important is beyond that door." The young officer looked back toward the warden. "Sir, I'm formally requesting delay until internal affairs arrives." The warden stepped forward slowly, calm mask fully back in place. "Denied." He nodded once to the guards at the chamber entrance. "Move him." The guards started pulling the man forward again. The man stumbled 1 step, turning his head back toward Rex. Rex's eyes locked onto him. And for 1 second, the dog stopped pulling, stopped barking, just stared at him, like he was trying to say something the system didn't have words for. Then Rex snapped his head back to the locked security door and barked so violently the sound cracked across the hallway. At that exact moment, a radio on one of the supervisor belts crackled loudly. "Execution wing, this is Central Security. Confirm delay status." The supervisor hesitated, looked at the warden, looked at Rex, looked at the young officer. The hallway hung in suspended tension. Then another voice broke through the radio, louder, more urgent. "Execution wing, Internal Affairs has entered the facility. They are requesting immediate hold on any active sentence enforcement." The young officer exhaled hard. The warden's jaw flexed once. Hard. But he said nothing. And 20 feet away, still chained, still being held by 2 guards, the man felt something crack open inside his chest. Not safety. Not freedom. But time. Time he was supposed to have any more. The execution hallway felt frozen in place after the radio call. No one moved for 3 full seconds. Then everything started moving at once. Footsteps thundered from the far end of the corridor. Multiple sets, fast, controlled, authority-level movement. Internal Affairs. The warden straightened his posture, shoulders squaring, face resetting into calm command. But a muscle jumped once in his jaw. "Stand by," he said evenly, raising one hand. The guards holding the man stopped pulling him forward. The execution chamber doors remained open behind them, cold air still rolling out like a reminder of what had almost happened. Rex stood perfectly still now. Not barking. Not pulling. Watching. Tracking. His ears flicked forward as 3 internal affairs agents turned the corner into the hallway. Dark suits, badge wallets already open, faces hard and focused. The lead agent spoke first. Execution hold is active. Step back from the inmate. The execution supervisor exhaled like someone had finally allowed him to breathe. The guards slowly loosened their grip on the man's arms. The warden stepped forward. On what grounds? The lead agent didn't hesitate. Financial corruption investigation tied to historical evidence chain handling. The hallway air turned heavy. The young officer closed his eyes for 1 second, relief hitting him hard. Rex's nose lifted slightly, scenting the new arrivals, then immediately shifted back toward the warden. The lead agent pulled out a folder, thick, tabbed, prepared. "We have transaction records," the agent said. "Offshore transfers routed through shell accounts. Dates match your temporary assignment to Central Evidence Logistics, same period as the warehouse shooting case." The warden's face stayed controlled, but color drained slightly from his cheeks. "That proves nothing," he said. The second agent stepped forward. "We also have surveillance from a neighboring logistics building. Shows you meeting with a known cartel intermediary 3 days before the warehouse raid." Silence crushed the hallway. Inside the line of guards, the man felt his knees weaken, not collapse, but shake, because the words felt unreal. Because Rex had been right. The warden shook his head once, circumstantial. Rex stepped forward. Growls starting again. Low, steady, certain. The handler let the leash move slightly this time, not releasing, but not fighting Rex's forward lean either. The lead internal affairs agent turned slightly toward the handler. "Is the dog trained suspect recognition?" "Yes," the handler said quietly. The agent nodded once, then looked back at the warden. "Interesting." The warden's eyes flashed with anger now. "You are building a case around an animal." The young officer spoke, voice steady now. "No, sir, around money and movement and timeline. The dog just forced us to look." Behind them, another agent arrived carrying a tablet. "Recovered external camera feed," she said, holding it up, "from adjacent warehouse parking structure." She tapped play. Grainy night footage filled the screen. Timestamp matching the night of the raid. The hallway outside the warehouse security office. A shadow moved into frame. Then the warden stepped into view. Younger but unmistakable. Speaking to another man, partially hidden behind a truck column. The second man handed him something small. Then both separated. The video ended. No one spoke. The man's vision blurred slightly from sudden tears. His chest felt like it might explode from pressure. Because this was real. Because this meant. Rex barked once. Sharp. And sad. Directly facing the warden. Final indication. The lead agent closed the folder slowly. "Warden, you are being detained pending formal charges of evidence tampering, obstruction, and conspiracy." 2 internal affairs officers stepped forward. The warden took 1 step back. For the first time since entering the hallway. He looked unsure. And Rex's growl deepened like he was confirming what everyone was finally starting to see. The hallway felt like it tilted sideways as 2 internal affairs officers moved in on the warden. "Hands where we can see them," the lead agent said, voice calm but final. The warden didn't move at first. His eyes flicked around the corridor. Guards, investigators, execution staff, the young officer, the inmate. Then Rex. Still sitting. Still locked on him. Still holding that perfect, trained indication posture. The warden's shoulders dropped half an inch. Not surrender. Calculation ending. Slowly he raised his hands. Metal cuffs clicked around his wrists seconds later. The sound echoed louder than it should have in the tight hallway. Behind the line of guards, the man's breath came in uneven bursts. His legs felt weak, his vision tunneled, because the person who helped build the case that killed his life was now in handcuffs. The young officer stepped closer to internal affairs. "There's more," he said quietly. "Evidence corridor access. Logs night of raid. I think they were altered." One of the agents nodded immediately. "Already flagged." The warden's head snapped slightly toward him, just enough to show fear. Rex stood. The handler let him step forward 2 paces, leash still tight but allowing movement. Rex stopped directly in front of the warden, close enough to smell him clearly. The growl faded. Rex inhaled slowly, deep, confirming. Then Rex turned his head slightly, a trained release signal. "Target verified." The handler swallowed. "He's done identifying." The lead internal affairs agent looked between them. "Good." They turned the warden toward the hallway exit. As they passed the man, the warden glanced at him once. Not anger. Not apology. Just cold calculation, like he was still trying to figure out if he could survive this. Then he was gone. Escorted down the corridor, boots fading into distance. The hallway didn't relax. Not yet. Because now everyone had to face what this meant. The execution supervisor lowered his clipboard slowly. "Sentence enforcement is suspended pending full review." The words sounded almost unreal. The guards holding the man loosened their grip further, not releasing him, but no longer forcing him forward. The man's chest shook once, hard like a dam cracking. He bent forward slightly, chains clinking softly, fighting for control of his breathing. Rex turned instantly and moved back to him, pressing against his leg again. Anchor position. The man closed his eyes and leaned into him as far as the cuffs allowed. Tears slid down his face, silent and steady now. The young officer watched them both, then looked toward internal affairs agents still working radios. "This is bigger than one case," he said quietly. One agent nodded. "Yeah, it is." Down the hall, more radios buzzed, more orders, evidence lockdown protocols, digital archive freezes. The system scrambling to protect what was left of itself. The execution chamber doors slowly closed behind them with a heavy mechanical thud. The sound made the man flinch, because he knew how close he had come. The handler crouched beside Rex, hand resting briefly on the dog's shoulder. "Good work," he whispered. Rex didn't react. He just stayed pressed against the man's leg. Still working. Still protecting. Because the danger wasn't over. Not yet. At the far end of the hallway, another internal affairs agent stepped in, speaking into his radio. "Begin review of all cases processed under former evidence oversight authority, starting with the warehouse shooting conviction." The man heard it. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself to breathe without feeling like he was drowning. But he didn't smile. Because freedom wasn't here yet. Truth had only just started moving. The transport van ride back to the holding facility was silent except for the hum of the engine and the rattle of chains with every bump in the road. The man sat on the metal bench, wrists cuffed, ankles restrained, eyes fixed on the floor. Not broken, not numb. Just exhausted. Across from him, a corrections officer watched quietly, not hostile, not friendly, just procedural. Through the small, reinforced window behind the driver's seat, the man could see Rex's silhouette in the escort vehicle ahead. Still there. Still guarding. The van stopped inside the secured intake bay of the detention unit. The back doors opened with a loud metal bang. Cold air rushed in. "Step out," a guard said. The man moved slowly, legs stiff from tension and hours of adrenaline. His boots hit concrete. The sound echoed in the enclosed bay. Inside processing, everything moved slower than before, less rushed, more careful. Different tone. Like the system wasn't sure what to do with him anymore. Paperwork was double-checked, phone calls made, new authorization codes entered into terminals. Temporary housing, administrative hold, one supervisor said to another. Not death row. Not general population. Limbo. Minutes later, the man sat inside a small, reinforced holding cell. Not a punishment cell, not a normal block cell. Observation unit. The heavy door closed with a solid mechanical lock. He sat on the narrow bench, elbows on knees, staring at the floor. Then, soft nails clicking outside the door. He looked up instantly. Through the narrow glass window, Rex sat in the hallway. Not moving. Watching the door. The man's throat tightened. Because Rex didn't do that for routine prisoner movement. He did that for protection. Time blurred over the next several hours. Agents walked past the hallway. Some stopped to look at Rex. Some whispered to each other. Some just avoided eye contact entirely. The handler stayed nearby, seated in a chair against the wall, leash loose but secure. Around midnight, the young officer appeared again, walking fast, holding a folder and a tablet. He stopped in front of the cell window, looked at the man. Didn't smile. But his eyes looked different now, less guarded. Warehouse case review is official. Ellie reopened, he said quietly through the door slot. The man's chest tightened. Not relief. Not yet. Just something shifting. The officer held up the tablet slightly. They found discrepancies in original ballistic mapping. Bullet trajectory doesn't match your position. The man closed his eyes for 1 second. His hands shook slightly in his lap. Outside, Rex stood. Tail still. Body alert. The officer continued. They're pulling every case touched by that evidence chain. It's going to take time. Time. The man nodded once. Because time was better than minutes. Footsteps approached from the far hallway. 2 prosecutors, 1 internal affairs supervisor. Serious faces. Clipboards. Decision-making people. The supervisor spoke quietly with the young officer. Then all 3 glanced toward the cell. Then toward Rex. Then back to each other. Like they were still trying to understand how a retired K-9 had forced the entire system to stop. Rex suddenly turned his head toward the facility entrance. Ears forward. Body tightening. The handler stood instantly, following his gaze. Someone's coming, the handler said quietly. The young officer frowned. At this hour. Down the hall, security doors buzzed open. Heavy footsteps entered the wing. Multiple people. Purposeful. Rex stepped forward. Low growl starting again. Not panic. Recognition. The man stood slowly inside the cell, heart starting to hammer again. Because Rex only reacted like that when something mattered. And whatever was walking into this unit right now was about to change everything again. The footsteps grew louder as they moved down the corridor. Firm, coordinated, not prison guards, not routine staff. Rex stepped closer to the hallway entrance, body stiff, ears fully forward. The low growl in his chest was steady and controlled, recognition mode. The handler tightened his grip on the leash but didn't pull Rex back. The security doors at the end of the hall opened again, with a heavy mechanical buzz. 3 new figures entered. 2 internal affairs supervisors. And a woman in a dark prosecutor's suit carrying a thick case file. Behind them, Two uniformed officers pushed a rolling evidence cart stacked with sealed boxes. The young officer straightened immediately. "Ma'am." The prosecutor nodded once. No smile, all business. "Emergency review findings," she said quietly, walking toward the cell. Rex's growl faded. He stepped forward once, sniffed the air, then relaxed half an inch. Not a threat. Not an enemy. The handler exhaled softly. "He's clearing them." The prosecutor stopped at the cell window and looked directly at the man. Up close he could see exhaustion in her eyes, and something else. "Resolve. We located archived storage misfiled under inactive case codes," she said. "Evidence that was never logged into trial review." The man's hands tightened into fists in his lap. Behind her, one officer opened a sealed box on the evidence cart. Inside were labeled bags, old, yellowing tags, untouched for years. The prosecutor continued. "One firearm recovered during a later cartel sweep. Ballistic match confirmed 30 minutes ago." The hallway felt silent. Heavy. Final. The man's vision blurred. He swallowed hard, chest shaking. "Not your weapon," she said. The words landed like physical impact. The young officer let out a slow breath beside Rex. The internal affairs supervisor spoke next. "Chain of custody logs show it was rerouted during the same week. The warden supervised evidence intake." Behind them, technicians started photographing and documenting every box on the cart. Rex moved back toward the cell door, then sat, facing the man. Calm now. Protective. Like the immediate danger had passed, but the watch was not over. The prosecutor looked back at the internal affairs team. "Emergency motion for sentence vacate is already filed." She turned back to the man. "This does not mean immediate release," she said clearly, "but it means your conviction is no longer secure." The man nodded slowly. "Because that was enough. For now." Down the hall, more staff began arriving. Legal teams, evidence techs, oversight officials. The system was waking up fully now. The young officer crouched beside Rex, rubbing once behind his ear. "You did it, partner." Rex didn't react to the praise. His eyes stayed on the cell. On the man. Still working. Still guarding. Inside the cell, the man sat back slowly against the wall, legs weak, chest rising and falling deep and shaky. Not free. Not safe. But no longer alone inside the system. Outside, dawn light began to faintly show through the high-security windows at the end of the hallway. A new shift. A new day. And for the first time in years, the future was no longer sealed shut. Just uncertain.